that gives us 235 polling stations, which I assume I did not use Kim's kit. Therefore, assuming that the manual system was employed to identify them, are you able to say the numbers from these 235 polling stations? I saw some figures like 860 or 86,000, 114,000. So if you can just clarify that for us. And again to Mr. Mahat, because he dealt with figures. Mr. Umtata yesterday presented also a PowerPoint to demonstrate that 1.6 million votes were cast or were streaming in many hours after the closure of voting. If you can also respond to that question. Mr. Gumbo, both Mr. Issa and Mr. George Oraro, Senior Counsel, in their submissions talked about how Kenyans were following the streaming of results live. And then something happened and that stopped. Can you explain to us what may have happened for this to have stopped? My lady, those are all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Council. Again, your submissions were most helpful. We thank you. Professor Muigai, you said that the whole dispute revolves around numbers. And you were before us in 2017, and the question of Section 83 of the Elections Act was prominent at the time. Morgan versus Simpson was prominent. You were Attorney General at the time. A number of things happened around Section 83 post our judgment. My question is, looking at the quantitative test, and Professor Kindiki raised the question too around Section 83. I had it before he raised it. Could you speak to it, and what is the approach you should take in this case regarding the test to apply? Number two, again to your team, and any of you could answer it. It's not a flippant question. I'm raising it deliberately because I have reason to. I know that the events of 15th August are in our minds, but remember that there was an extra day by which Mr. Chebukati could have declared the result. Why did he not wait until that day, violence or no violence? Perhaps you have another reason. Reach out to the commissioners, the four that are now named the four. Try and reach a consensus. Address the question of the 27 constituencies so that these suspicions that have now cropped up would not have been an issue. Is there any other reason why he did not take advantage of the extra day to do what he had to do? Mr. Oraro, I understand where you're coming from. I understand where your clients are coming from. I understand where Mr. Kenyo and Mr. Kihara and the rest are coming from. We are now in a sport where public office is becoming exceedingly dangerous. Falsehoods are being peddled, not just to those on this side, but more even on this side and those outside. So I understand the need for you to say, my clients would like to clear their names because they've been mentioned in these proceedings. But let us come back to the proceedings, the pain of social media, the pain of affidavits aside. What do you want this court to do with the information you've given us? So we have had your side of the story. We've had Mr. Chebukati's side. We've had Cherera's side and our colleagues. What do you tell the court to do in the context of this judgment, in the context of the issues for determination? What do we do with the matters you placed before us? And while you're at it, you also mentioned Section 83. Perhaps you could also say something about Regulation 87.3. Perhaps since you appear for the Attorney General, and for the first time you're not appearing as amicus but as a respondent, could you say something about Regulation 87.3 and the question I posed to Mr. Noroji? It would be helpful for us if we could hear you on that question. I believe those are my, Mr. Mahat, I may have missed this, but I still want to clear my mind. This is a question I posed to Mr. Murgor as well. So the format initially is JPEG. At what point exactly does it convert to PDF? Forget the CSV story. I guess Mr. Murgor dropped that. But I just want to understand for myself. At what point? You've taken the image, you've asked all the questions, very good questions you've asked, the system has asked you the question. At what point does it convert to PDF? I thank you all very much. Thank you, Judge President.
Thank you, Judge President. My questions will go to Professor Muigai, as we've been asked by a number of parties that they've asked us to settle the law around Article 138.3 and 10. In your submissions, you suggested that the term commission can be used in multiple senses. How do we know which sense will be applied when? As a former Attorney General, perhaps you can point out to us whether it is in regulations, it is in the law, but how do we know which sense is applied when? My second question goes to the history of independent commissions, and Professor Muigai, you sat on the CKRC together with my colleague, Justice Lenaola, and you do know that the drafters of the Constitution introduced independent commissions and independent offices to deal with issues of authoritarianism, accountability, transparency, and to do away with the issue of one person having power. But from the narrative that we're hearing here in the court, there appears to be an all-powerful chair who, so what is the check for this all-powerful chair if the commissioners have nothing to do with his role? What would happen if the chair was to announce the wrong results completely? Or if he was mentally incapacitated or sick, or worst case scenario, dead? Who then would announce the results? What is the role of the other commissioners? I think this is bothering me, especially because it seems to me that your client and the IEBC suggest that the chairperson works with the CEO, and I feel a bit concerned. The CEO is not vetted by Parliament. He is appointed, but he seems to wield immense powers over and above the other commissioners. I cannot imagine that that could have been the intention of the drafters of the Constitution. So what role do these commissioners actually do? Because it hasn't come clearly. Or, for example, if one commissioner says he's in charge of ICT, what does that mean? Does it mean he's in charge of ICT until the presidential election, then he's not? What does it mean? What is the role of these commissioners? And I'm asking this question more towards trying to understand the leadership and the management in the commission as opposed to the management of the presidential election. Because I think they're two separate issues, and I'm trying to figure out whether this is a Chebukati problem. Is it a leadership problem? Is it a commissioner's problem? What's this problem we're seeing? I'm trying to understand that, and I'd like to hear that from you. Thank you. One more question, sorry. When the results come for other elections, so you have returning officers for senator, for governor, for MCA, and they're all announced or declared locally at the polling station constituency county. How is that information transmitted to the public? And when that information is transmitted to the public through a gazette notice, are the commissioners involved? Or is it the CEO only? Or is it the chairperson only? Who is involved in the declaration or the transmission of declaration publicly of those results? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. My first question, I think, could be addressed by Mr. Karori. In the morning, you did really argue quite strongly that when it comes to verification, tallying, and declaration of the result, the presidential election result, that really, if you look at the law in your interpretation of the Article 138 and the jurisprudence that you say emanates from this court, you seem to be arguing that that is strictly within the purview of the chair's mandate, and that really these other commissioners, let's say the remaining, the 6 commissioners, really ought not to be around that, because that's a role preserved for the chair. But then you said, according to the statute that establishes this commission, the enabling statute, the roles and functions of the commission, commission, are stated. One of them is oversight. What is oversight? If, in fact, the commissioners, I would have thought that one of the most important oversight roles in the commissioner's life would be when they are overseeing the verification and tallying of the presidential election result at the center before the same is then declared on behalf and for, and but for the people of Kenya by the chair. So what is oversight? I ask this because we were informed yesterday, and I think you were here, that instead of perhaps playing this role, some of them were allocated welfare scenarios, protocol, and media. But what is oversight? What would they be oversighting over? That's the question. In other words, at what point in this corporate entity scenario does the chair then disengage from the other commissioners? Be they 2 or be they 5 or 6? When do you say this is chair qua chair and this is chair as part of the commission? Because we need to understand that. We've been asked to provide clarity. Then let's go to Mahat. Mahat, there is this story about this Venezuelan. And one of the issues is whether the technology system employed or deployed was penetrated. And you did tell us, again, quite robustly, that there was no such penetration or infiltration or intrusion, or whichever. But you did also concede that this Venezuelan, whatever his name is, had access to the server. But your answer was that the contract between the IEBC and Smartmatic was to supply and maintenance. So if I understood you correctly, this Venezuelan was accessing the server as part of the maintenance. So what is this maintenance? What does it entail? What was he doing there? Say he was released and locked out just before the election. So what was he maintaining in that system? Maybe you just want to tell us what maintenance entails as part of that contract agreement. Then back to the question of percentages again, in terms of the turnout. I think I asked this question, I asked Mr. Orengo, but now that you may not have another, you may also want to address it. In the arguments that have been presented before us, Mr. Chebukati, the chair, first mentioned a 65.4% turnout. And then he did indicate that that was bound to change as results kept streaming in, especially if you took into consideration the number of those who had voted manually and the numbers that had yet to come in from the elders. Now, it is the petitioner's argument that if there was to be any change at all, then that percentage would have to increase rather than decrease. So I don't know. And how relevant, again, is this turnout to the determination of whether a candidate gathered 50% plus one vote? And then, you see, we have been asked by Mr. Ngatia, who do you believe among these two protagonists? Who do you believe? This question has been put to us, and believe you me, we will have to deal with it. Who do we believe? Now, the question of the National Security Advisory Council. This, I think, Mr. Oraro, this could be of interest to you. On the one hand, you are telling us that this personnel visited the premises at the Bomas to express their concern, because, of course, being an advisory council, they must have arrived at a conclusion that unless results were released, then there was bound to be chaos. But on the other hand, the chair, in his affidavit, tells the court that the only reason the AG, or I mean not the AG, but the individuals, distinguished people for whom we have a lot of respect, paid that visit, was to tell the chair to somehow re-engineer the results in favor of one of the candidates. Now, this is not a question to you, but a question to Mr. Chepkati's counsel. Professor, you may want to, or even Mr. Karori, are we to assume that by the time Mr. Kinyo placed this call, if the intention was to influence the declaration of the results, to change it, to re-engineer it, are we to assume that by the time that call was placed and by the time this gentleman paid this visit, they already knew the results? Because there's no way they would have been on that mission if they had not known the results. So are we to assume that in fact, if this be their mission, are we to assume that they already knew the results? Okay. Then finally, Mr. Kilokumi, you know, you cited King Solomon. And this court treats Holy Scriptures very seriously. You came up with, you say there is victory. Because in King Solomon's story, the protagonists were distinguished mothers. But here, you called them two gentlemen. But I also remember that one of the mothers who turned out, or the mother claimants, who according to Solomonic wisdom could not have been the mother, is the one who was saying, cut the baby. But the other one, I remember, said, no, let her take. Because what she was interested in is to preserve the baby. Would you be willing to advise? I rest my case.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable CJ and President of the Court. I just have one inquiry, one question for the respondents. and it may go to, actually it may be answered by either the council, senior counsel Gidu Muigai and his team for the first and second respondents, or it could also be taken up at the same time by counsel for the ninth respondent. That is the team of the team of senior counsel Fred Ngatia. It's my understanding that one of the submissions and cases in response by the first and second respondents, on the one hand, and the ninth respondent, that is the president-elect, are placing the blame on the events of the ninth at the Tarling Center, Bomas of Kenya. That the two groups of parties are placing the blame on the first and second petitioners' agents and sympathizers and supporters during the tallying and verification. Of course, we have images. Many of us were not there. At least the bench was not there. But we have images which we saw on TV. We cannot say anything about what exactly happened, but we just know there was commotion, and people are throwing chairs and even perhaps attempts to harm each other. But we cannot say anything about it ourselves as a bench. Neither were those matters before us in these proceedings. No evidence or allegations, the affidavits. We have seen the affidavits, seen the submissions, but no actually determination or delving into any evidence. So, and yet there is a request, a suggestion that we should attribute and apportion blame among we should place the blame on some parties, particularly the petitioners, because of their agents, supporters, and therefore actually you expect, particularly I can see the submissions of the ninth respondent, and even I saw the affidavit of Professor Goulier, where he actually says he expects action to be taken to investigate those criminal election offenses. So I just wanted to inquire that would you expect, having had such elaborate submissions and affidavits, would you still expect us to make a determination, apportion blame, attribute blame, yet really the matter is not before us? Neither are we witnesses, neither were we at the Bomas, neither were these matters had on merit before us. That's the question I would like you to think about and reflect, and when you come back, you will tell us whether you expect any release from us on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge President. My clarifications will be sought from the team led by Professor Gidu Muigai, Senior Counsel. The first clarification I seek is as follows. As regards the requirements of Article 140, and just remaining within Article 140, and even considering that the 4 new commissioners only arrived in, was it September last year? And whatever it is they've been doing on a day-to-day basis, please clarify in my mind, because it's a major issue here, what the constitutional role of the 6 commissioners is under Article 140. And once you tell us what it is, just position their role against that of the staff of the Secretariat and of the chair. to the same team, and that is as per Article 138, 3C. To the same team, of course, numbers are critical. They are, for me, they are. Because that is a mandate of 138 for A and B, the threshold, the 50% plus 1. And numbers are important for as long as they are not negated by any other process. And numbers would point to a good election, a good result, if they are not affected by anything else. And if Article 138 for A and B are not enough, deriving from them, this court in 2017 told us that although numbers were very, very important, other things could affect the numbers. Now, here is my concern. With the fact of the numbers being undisputed, they are important, kindly comment on whether or not, this question flows from the first one, the walking away of the 4 commissioners to go and hold, was it an IBC meeting at Serena? Or was the IBC meeting at Bomas? But please comment on the walking away of the 4 commissioners almost at the same time as the chair was about to declare the results. And in fact, I recall, because I was glued on TV myself, among their first words were that we have done an excellent job as concerns this election. But the results that the chairman is about to release are his results. So please comment for my benefit that working out and how was it timed? You've got to know, because these are your clients, that they would be walking out of Bomas to Serena to allow all media houses, in fact, except for the violence that occurred at Bomas, the split screens of media houses would have been showing each one of them addressing us, the Kenyan voter, at the same time. In fact, at one moment there, I thought the team at Serena would give us their numbers, and the team at Bomas was going to give us their own numbers. So my concern is, does their walking out mean anything under Article 140? If it does, what is it? If it doesn't, why not? Still on numbers, and answering all of us, yours and our issue number 4 and 5, we were told, and I need clarity on this one because it cuts across 2 main issues, that the turnout, the voter turnout, was affected by the postponed election. Now, this is my concern. On the 9th, we were voting for 6 people, 6 officers. And we actually voted for 6 offices, including in the places where elections were postponed. And we were told that turnout was affected by the postponement. And since you are the central player in this thing, you could pass this to Mahat or anybody else in your team. Did the postponement affect only the vote of the president? And since we are in the habit of taking judicial notice, and since I am in a position to take judicial notice of the fact that elections have since happened in the postponed areas, have the subsequent elections returned a different result as to turnout? Because that happened, was it Monday? And we have yet to write a judgment. If they are affected, in what respect? Mr. Mahat, you told us that there is a holy place. You called it a sanctified place for the agents. And that it is the responsibility of parties to have agents. Your sister, while submitting, Ngania, told us that in 2017, we also emphasized the position of the agent. This is my question flowing from that, and it goes to the process of the election. What if there were no agents? The Article 81, I think 81E, places the burden of ensuring that we have a fair, free, transparent, accountable, and all those things, election, where, for whatever reason, agents are not present at an election. Is it not the role of the IEBC to ensure that Article 81E is upheld? And in the event, I know you said in Tiati some constituency there, in fact, there were no agents from anyone. The process, and where there are no agents, the process. Finally, we have seen somebody named the 4 commissioners as respondents. One of these petitions, or some of them, named them as respondents. I think someone had even named them as interested parties or something like that during interlocutories. But by whatever name code, they remain commissioners. We have seen affidavits that they have sworn, which tend to show that they take certain positions. Now, what is the position to be taken by a commissioner? Is it a position of the party, any party, or is it the neutral position of the IEBC? And when they take, as I think they have done in this case, the position of any side, what is the court to do? Did I say finally? Then I'll say the second finally. That Kenywa's call, Mr. Joseph Kenywa's call, and whatever else that happened, the night meetings, the security issues, and so on and so forth. The name of this commission starts with the letter I, which says, I stands for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And in the body of 88 going down is that, and even in their act, they shall not be directed in the manner in which they do their work. But I want you to clarify in my mind, because it's now an issue here, when it comes to writing the judgment, what do you want me to write? There are commissioners, and we talked about the dysfunctionality. It came from you, it didn't come from this side of the bench. Of the commission, I'm glad today I have had
this is in our minds. Then when we look at